I'm assuming, yeah.
Cool.
Or agents or whatever.
All right, great. All right, cool. Well, thanks everybody for joining. We're really excited to have Rachael Heisler here. I'll give you a funny story about how Rachael and I met. She was canvassing in her city controller race and came to my door, and we had a nice chat, and the rest is history.
2.5 years later.
Yeah, it's funny how I've actually met a number of candidates just through canvassing like that. So yeah, but anyways, Rachael can probably give a much better intro to herself than I'll be able to. But she's the city controller. We're really happy to have her here to talk about the work that she's doing, and then also how that can relate to housing and the work that we're doing. So Rachael, I'll hand it off to you. I think the way we want to structure this is you say whatever you want to say, but probably just open discussion, with the crew that we have here.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks, Amy. So hi, everyone. My name is Rachael Heisler. I'm the controller for the city of Pittsburgh. I was elected in 2023, sworn in January of 2024. The way I'll do it is I'll give a presentation or commentary, I guess, on city finances as of the end of last year, where we are as of mid-year 2025. Open it up for Q&A, and we can just have a conversation, right? Okay, so how did we finish last year? We released an annual report. The city controller has 3 core functions, right? Accounting, accounts payable, and auditing, which evaluates that spending for economy, efficiency, and scale. We're the 3rd branch of government in the city of Pittsburgh. The mayor's the executive, city council's the legislative branch, and that check and balance on the rest of city government is the city controller's office. So we finished 2024 where we thought we would. We did pretty well. Why is that? We received $335 million in 2021 from the American Rescue Plan Act, COVID relief. So over the course of the last 4 years, we have spent down almost all of that money. We have about $10 million left in the bank as of June. And that money is all encumbered. It cannot be reallocated. And each of those 4 years, we spent it on various proposals, priorities, lead line replacement, some URA priorities, but about $50 million a year went to the general fund. So we are not going to see that $50 million this year in the general fund. So you will see when you evaluate the 2025 annual comprehensive financial report on May 1st, 2026, which I'm sure you all are looking forward to already, you're going to notice that off the bat, we're starting with about $50 million less, right? We are just not going to see that deposit. So, but we finished 2024 in a pretty healthy position. The fund balance, which is the rainy day fund, did pretty well. We're at $200 million, right? The goal to keep in that account is 16.7%, which is a 2-month supply of general operating, which is about $100 million. On our current trajectory, we are going to hit 10% by the end of 2029. And with our current expenditure trajectory, we are going to deplete those funds, right? That is the big concern with city finances. We have issues with revenue, for sure, but those revenue projections are accurate. The thing that sorry, I shouldn't touch the microphone. The thing that I have continued to yell about is expenditures are not accurately reflected in the budget. What was the first thing that I raised a flag about? Overtime. What are we going to spend? What's going to be $2 million over budget when we finish this year? Overtime. If we're lucky, we'll be at 20 million, not at 25, right? So at the end of 2024, we finished the year in a really okay position, right? We knew that this was coming. We knew that 2025 and 2026 were going to be particularly delicate. So where are we mid-year 2025? We're spending on a departmental level. And these numbers are all of June 30th. We are spending $25 million more on the departmental level than we did at the same point in 2024. Why is that a problem? Well, like I mentioned earlier, we don't have $50 million that we had in 2024. So if that trend continues, we're going to spend $50 million more and have $50 million less, right? That's quite the delta. So that is a significant and unsustainable trend. Unsustainable is the better word. Significant is the reason I'm using that word is because we have not seen such a significant trend in the last 15 years. Part of that is Act 47, which is the program that the city went into at the end December of 2003, basically put us in handcuffs, and the state was overseeing and making sure that every decision, every contract was fiscally smart. And we got out of that position in 2018. We were growing as a city. Our tax base was growing year over year. And here we are now. Our real estate tax base is shrinking. It's not shrinking as significantly as some other cities, but it is shrinking in a way, in a direction that we need to be alarmed. Why is that? One, 25% of all city revenue comes from real estate, right? Real estate taxes, rather. 25% of that 25% comes from downtown. Those commercial buildings are worth less than they were in 2019. There's no one who's disputing that. The school district challenges every deed transfer. Every time there's a deed transfer in the East End, the school district, not the city, challenges their tax assessment. And the school district has a really high success rate in the East End. So their success rate has buoyed our property tax value citywide because of the East End. I think that that's, generally speaking, a really unfair practice, and I think that there should just be regular reassessments countywide and citywide, and however it should happen. I think they should just happen every 5 years, because this is a dumb way to do things, but here we are. So the city, our real estate tax portfolio as a source of revenue is shrinking year over year, but it isn't shrinking as noticeably because of what's happening in the East End when these real estate taxes are, when the property tax is challenged by the school district. The city as a policy does not challenge those and get involved in that. We are projecting now, I just had our fiscal task force meeting today that the mayor convened when I said last year we were running out of money. And they are now projecting that we will be under budget for wage taxes. 25% of all city tax revenue comes from wage taxes. So wages, all of us probably live in the city. We all work. If you work, and I don't care if you work at a part-time job at the JCC and you earn $15,000 a year, or if you're a partner at a law firm downtown, everybody pays a wage tax if they live in the city of Pittsburgh. 1.25% goes to the city, 1.75% goes to the school district. That is actually going to finish under budget. It continues to grow, though, and just it's a little bit slower growth than I would like. And then the other thing that is an indicator for economic growth is the $52. It's called the local services tax. And it is the tax that we can, and it's the highest it can be. It's dictated by state law. It's $52 a year, and it's $1 a week. That if you live in Cranberry and you work downtown, that's the tax we levy on you. And if you divide that number by 52 at the end of the year, you can guesstimate approximately how many people are working in the city of Pittsburgh. And the notable thing at the end of last year was the number from 2023 to 2024 dropped by about 30,000. Now, yeah, it's significant in a year over year number, but what we think, because wage taxes were stable year over year, is that people were just catching up with work from home, like if, and hadn't updated their, where they were working with whatever tax forms they fill out with their employer. But it is a reminder to be mindful, because Giant Eagle, for example, was in Lawrenceville and in the Strip District, and they moved to Warrendale. And that's an example of an employer that we should work to keep in Pittsburgh, because those are corporate jobs that we need to work to. We need to have our the corporation needs to have a relationship with the city. And as an example with Giant Eagle, and I'll use them, they were trying to figure out how to pay their real estate taxes in the beginning of 2024, and somehow ended up calling the controller's office. And we don't collect taxes, we spend money, and those duties are segregated intentionally. And they did not have a relationship with anyone in city government to figure out how to pay the real estate taxes. And so that's a thing that I think needs to be a priority for whomever is mayor, is we need to make sure, that we're working with businesses. And I don't care if you're, someone who owns a card store, your Wild Card on Butler Street, or you're, Giant Eagle, like, you want to pay your like, yeah, you should be able to get in touch with somebody.
About the local services tax.
Yeah.
Should we move the mic?
Oh, sure. Or do you want me to keep going? It probably makes sense while I'm talking about LST to ask a question about LST.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I'll repeat the question.
Yeah, the Bureau of Labor Statistics like breaks out job numbers like for the city as a municipality, separate from the Allegheny County, and they are reporting that there are more jobs in Pittsburgh. Are we just bad at collecting taxes?
So
right, our taxes are going down, yet there are supposedly more
jobs
than there's
so
ever
yes
been here.
So there is, yes, we are bad at collecting revenue. If there are loopholes, if you're self-employed, if you're and I will admit to not knowing enough about all of those categories. If you're a W-2, is that if you are an employee versus a contractor, those are different categories. But yeah, we're actually really bad at collecting taxes. You would be shocked to learn that.
I'm not shocked.
We are like, so I mentioned the jock tax, right? So it's called the facility usage fee. The city has conceded it's a tax in court, right? So we lost the challenge in the trial court in Allegheny County. We lost in the Commonwealth Court. We've appealed to the Supreme Court of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. It was in court in May. I'm not a lawyer, but it's my understanding that we probably will hear something in the next few months. But the argument has always been that we will continue. We believe that this tax is lawful, and we are continuing to collect it. We are projecting to be under budget by more than $4 million this year because we have stopped collecting it. And when the conversation came up today, it was like, well, that's like one, if we owe refunds, the players themselves or the performers themselves will have to petition for a refund because we are at this point collecting lawfully because we believe that this is a lawful tax, right? So, I mean, that's one example.
Whose job is it to collect those taxes?
The treasurer, the city treasurer. So again, there is a likelihood that if the court sides with the Supreme Court sides with the lower courts, that refunds will be owed, and that will be a separate process, and that will be something that we have to pay out. But it will be up to the payer to petition the city for a refund. And I'm not a lawyer, but if their money is money that we are, again, at this point, we are lawfully collecting it. So why aren't we collecting it? Right? So yes, we are very, very, very bad at collecting taxes. I mean, very bad. As you might imagine, our office ends up getting into weeds in terms of various things. But at one point, this was something we wanted to pursue, is looking at all these different revenue streams about what aren't we collecting. I don't know who here has a security alarm at their house, but if you do, you're supposed to pay an annual license, I think is what it's called, to the city to have it at your house, because the likelihood of it going off accidentally and deploying emergency services is actually quite high, and it actually is a strain on public safety. And the $50 a year that you have to pay, or whatever the charge is now, is not unreasonable for the one visit a year that will likely happen because you have an alarm, right?
Interesting. Who is the treasurer?
Jen Gula, and she's actually wonderful. There's the real estate, there's been longstanding issues with the revenue collection strategy, and a lot of these issues actually stems from a longstanding contract we have. One of them is required by the state. It's Jordan Tax Services. In every place we've been able to, and I hope they hear this, we've gotten rid of them as a city. But there's the joint taxation, the state actually mandates that we work with them, which I used to work when I moved back to Pittsburgh. I worked my DC job, and so I had to write quarterly checks, and I had to print out a piece of paper, use scissors, print out. I mean, it's asking for people to make mistakes. And I intended, I wanted to pay my taxes, and I'm like, isn't there a place where I can type this in and you can tell me what I owe, and I can even if you don't want me to pay with the credit card and it's ACH, it's no. I mean, it's crazy. So yes, I don't dispute in any point BLS data, and even more so now that they fired the economist, which is insane. But we are bad at collecting revenue. I mean, and I think in circumstances like that, it requires some sort of robust system. And how do you collect it from people? And I also have, we've been doing and can I get into short-term rentals?
Sure.
Okay, so we have calculated that there are about 3,000 short-term, like VRBO, Airbnb units, which obviously it's two issues. One, they don't have the safety and security that a typical hotel does. Two, they take offline rentals that someone could live in like for a year or two or 3 or 4 while they're in school. And the additional issue is actually a revenue one. So if you are like, I bought actually when I moved back here, but you rent, like you have a job, you rent, you don't know if you're gonna stay, you don't have financial resources to buy a house. We've calculated that it costs the city about $4 million a year on earned income alone. Because those people, 3,000 units, you look at average income, 2 people live there. And then we haven't figured out how to extrapolate that, because when you look at where Airbnbs are, they're not in places where people don't make, higher wages. They're in places where people want to stay for the weekend, right? So they're in Lawrenceville, they're in Squirrel Hill, they're in the South Side. You know what I mean? They're in neighborhoods where people want to go and where wages tend to be higher. And so it's actually very likely that it's closer to $6 million a year in wage taxes alone of those properties. And I believe, and I will say this, that the Airbnb market needs to be part of the lodging supply, because we don't have enough hotels here. And that's a separate issue in terms of what, the conversations we're having about housing. But there needs to be some mitigation when you're looking at these people that come in here. The reason they got into the Airbnb market to begin with is probably because they left the city and they didn't want to sell their house. So they started Airbnb-ing it. They realized they could make a lot of money. So they're living in Baldwin, and they're basically benefiting from all these city services and paying nothing.
Wait, sorry,
But
they have to pay taxes on the landlord revenue, right, from Airbnb?
On the what revenue?
She's saying you're losing wage
tax
taxes. Revenue
Oh, you're
because
saying because
nobody's
the
living
but
there.
the landlords are still paying the taxes on the Airbnb revenue.
Yeah, but the wage taxes are, it's $4 million to the city alone.
I was going to say, I assume that they're also not paying hotel tax either.
Those go to the county, but yeah.
Can the city levy a hotel tax?
I don't believe so, based on state law. But the county could, and then share. What would be nice is if they would share some of that revenue with the city. The big issue with the draft is all of the initial financial benefits, the drink tax, the hotel tax, the car rental tax, there's 1 or 2 others.
Those are all county levies.
They're all county. And the amusement tax, the tickets to the draft are free. And yes, parking will be a boon for those 5 days, but a lot of the parking lots where people would park are inside of the security perimeter. So they're going to be yes, we will get, but it's not for people. It's just like that those lots are going to be rented by the NFL for the weekend. And we will get, I forget it's calculated, but the percentage, but it's like, a lot of that is not going to come to the city, and the cost of that is going to fall disproportionately to the city residents, right? Because every police officer is going to be working overtime at some point during those 5 days. Every medic, every firefighter. They're going to shoot off fireworks probably every 15 minutes, and you're going to have firefighters on the fireboats and the barges. It's going to be a cost to the city, and I don't not want the draft to come. I am pro-draft. I think it's great. I love Pittsburgh. I want everybody else to love Pittsburgh. But we also need to be honest of, there's a cost to that.
It's like the Olympics.
Right.
Like most people lose money, so I think that
Yeah. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
But I don't think we should be paying for it.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I don't want to get into the public
the
financing of
city
stadiums.
already shoulders a lot of costs for the region.
Yeah.
I remember, thinking back to this is like the Luke Ravenstall days. he would always talk about how like we're the living room for the entire region.
That's actually a great. I did not know he said that.
I'm pretty sure it was him. Maybe I'm attributing it, but I remember. I feel like he said that, and I thought it was really, it was really good to think about. Like you think about all these people who live outside of the city proper, who call themselves Pittsburghers, and they are, in my opinion, they are Pittsburghers. But
they live in Plum.
They're coming to the city for entertainment. They're coming to the city for sporting events. They're coming for work.
Go to the doctor.
Right, all sorts of things, and all of the burden of the infrastructure to support that is on only us as city residents, which is why we need city-county consolidation, municipal consolidation.
Shared services, etc.
Congestion pricing. I can only dream of congestion
Let's
pricing.
go there.
Might be a riot who tried to toll the Fort Pitt Bridge.
You'd have a revolt. Amy, and then I want to go back to 2025 finances, and then we can.
I don't want to go too far back, but I want to know more about, you talked about how property taxes downtown are cratering for reasons known to us. But you talked about the burden being in the East End. Like, why is that? Like, I read about like adding more students. Like, why are places like Oakland not having?
So I say the East End just because this is where property values are highest. But they are like, I had a neighbor in Manchester. I live on the north side in Manchester, and she bought a house. She has 5 kids. They bought a house in Manchester. Someone had a house someone had lived in for 40 years. Sold it. They renovated it themselves, lived through it. The house ended up being reassessed, and her property taxes literally tripled. And she's like, she can't, and I don't want to divulge anything. They've elected to not send their kids to public school because she's worried about, the education and the circumstance. So she's like, it's triple. Like, I can move to Ross Township, send my kids to public school, and save money. And so it's happening across the city. The school district what happens is when a property is bought or sold, and there's a significant, delta from the last time it was bought or sold, it triggers the school district to challenge the assessed value. I will admit to not being totally aware of like what happens first, but it goes before the Board of Appeals, and the school district pursues it and pursues it and pursues it, and they're often successful. And
so what you're saying is there's more sales
in the East End, and because of the increasing property values and the sale prices in the East End, we make more money. And I say that recognizing that this comes from people's pocketbooks, but we make more money off of those sales in the East End because from a house on Dunmoyle Street to, the sale 20 years later, it's a significant increase in.
House sold for $80,000 in 2000 that now sells for $800,000.
Yeah, and it increases the tax liability considerably, it helps mitigate the significant loss in revenue we're experiencing downtown because those property values are just literally cratering.
But it's deeply unfair.
Totally.
Deeply unfair.
Yeah. The whole system. I mean, and then you think about it, like if you buy right now, like property value, I mean, people are cutting, it's covered in the paper all the time. If you want to sell a house now, you're probably cutting from where you were 6 months ago because home sales are slowing. Part of that's a macro trend, right? Trump, the economy, tariffs, global trade wars, whatever. But it is impacting. And if you had bought that same house next door, if you're in Somerset and the houses are literally identical, like it's ridiculous. It just needs to be done. Reassessments need to be done on regular intervals every 5 to 10 years. This is stupid. It's dumb. And like punting it so it becomes a political football makes it even worse because then it becomes a campaign issue and there's no conversation. And my big concern is though that Allegheny County needs to do it no matter what, but like Westmoreland County hasn't done it since the 70s.
Right.
And that's then you're going to have these like regional wars I mean, it's like what they do when
A
they
lot of
can.
places don't even wait 5 or 10 years.
We're
Yeah, I
one
mean,
of the few states that don't have
It needs
state
to go
law.
we are the only state in the country that doesn't require it on a periodic basis, and Allegheny County is the largest county in the country that doesn't require it, because Philly does require it, and in fact, even the county has on the books a requirement to do a regular
Well-
reassessment, but there's no enforcement mechanism.
No, of course not. And the thing is, too, I do recognize that 30 years ago, it probably used, and I have no idea what the mechanism was 30 years ago, but I recognize it used to probably take longer, right? You had Excel spreadsheets,
Yeah,
or you had
it's easy now.
now, yeah, like it's
we have the data.
it's AI. I mean, I assume it's like AI, and then people,
Algorithm.
an algorithm, and people perfecting it.
There's I mean, Jack Billings isn't here, but he's done.
Oh,
a lot of
I hear
research
from
into
him all the
this.
time. Yes.
But yeah, Jack.
Yeah. Hopefully he hears that clip and it goes on his Instagram. But no, seriously. And I think, too, and if you do it on an annual-
out there that can do these reassessments for, like, the county's saying it'll cost $60 million.
That's stupid. No, it won't.
And there's companies out there that are saying it'll cost under $1 million to do it with modern tools and modern data practices.
And there's no reason. I mean, you raise a good point. If you do it every year, then it's painless every year, right?
Correct.
Because it's going up by $20 or $100 every year, and you don't feel it. I live in the Mexican War streets, as I probably have talked about in here before, and I have neighbors who have lived in their homes and bought in that neighborhood when no one else wanted to, right? And it's still a majority minority neighborhood. I love my neighbors, and I am anti-historic preservation, as I have also discussed, and I do remain worried for a few neighbors who want to stay in their homes and would be priced out if there are drastic property tax increases overnight. And I do think that there are programs that we need to make sure we do to protect, but I do recognize too that, as David and I have talked about, that most people, those people are few and far between. And we need to make sure that those programs that protect people are doing just that and protecting people instead of exempting people from a tax liability that they can afford to pay.
Well, right, because I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, and like, these programs that are meant to insulate people against rising property taxes, these people have already been insulated from rising property taxes.
Right, for 30
They've
years.
gone over a decade or multiple decades in some cases without seeing their property tax liability go up at all.
And their government that they're using has increased costs.
Correct.
Literally week over week.
Right. It's a transfer from new homeowners, which tend to be younger, less wealthy people, to older, more tenured or not necessarily older, but more tenured homeowners who tend to be more wealthy.
Yeah. I mean, I don't, again, and I don't know why this practice started, and maybe it's just like no one had the balls to, sorry, I probably shouldn't say that. No one had the courage, to say, like, we just need, this needs to be done more regularly, but the practice now is like abhorrent and embarrassing because it's just like, this is ridiculous and dumb. And it turns into a political football. So it needs to just be.
And even our current county executive ran on doing a reassessment and nothing, right?
It needs to be codified, and it needs to.
It is codified in Allegheny County.
But does it have
code,
teeth?
But there's no teeth.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Her and our sitting mayor have said that the state should take it up.
Sure, but
Okay, they
they
haven't,
also have
so
the
here we are.
county council has the power to do this. Like they don't need to pass the buck to the state. They should just do it.
I do. So, what are your thoughts? And I'll ask all of you in this room about like easing something in, right? Because I am weary about someone who has had a tax liability of $1,000 giving them a $10,000 tax liability next year.
That won't happen though.
You don't think so?
No,
I'm asking.
So I've done some analysis on this. Like I'll have to send it to you. I mean, the average increase for people, even in the hottest neighborhoods, would be a few $100s, and in some neighborhoods would actually be a decrease, because it really all depends on, did your area increase at a rate that is faster or slower than the average? If your neighborhood increased by 40%, but the whole city increased by 40%, your tax increase will be zero.
I would love
because
for,
the millage rate is reset. You know what I mean?
Oh, okay.
Can't increase revenue.
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I would love for the city to make that available publicly. Like,
I have the
look,
data.
like search up. They have the data.
I have the data.
I have the data.
Put it on the
Why don't
control.
I think the
they
city
do
has
that?
the data.
Like,
Want to put it on the
True
controller's
that.
office website?
it's like look up how your property taxes would change in a reassessment, and then let the voters.
That seems beyond the city's ability to like see. I'm very skeptical.
Well, so the data set that I built has every parcel in the city and an estimated new value for it, and then estimated new taxes after you reset the millage.
we
I
should
actually
make a
kind of have
website. We
this.
should make a website. But we make
It's
it,
pretty rudimentary.
no, but we have enough
like-
people that I think that can do it.
No, but like I'm saying, like the methodology is
Oh, I
is
see.
not super sophisticated. But
I have
I
a
was just
comment
trying.
back here, too.
What's that?
I guess I think to Rachel's question, like the impact on the average person is meaningful, but I think what she's also asking is like, well, but there's a long tail of people in whichever side who might be pretty
Yeah.
affected. And like that doesn't mean not do it. Like maybe then you accommodate. Like, all right, what do we do about the people that are there accommodations for that? But just keep in mind, like just because the average isn't affected, there might be some people who are 87 years old and haven't had a change.
Yeah.
Well, but I did parcel by parcel assessments. Essentially, I took every parcel, and I think even like this idea of somebody's taxes going from 1,000 to 10,000, it's just not a thing. Like
Right.
nobody's taxes would
Right.
increase by that much. Some people might go from 1,000 to 2,200 or 1,000 to 2,500, something like that,
Right.
which is still significant.
So-
I'm not disputing that, but it's not like. I think people have this idea like, oh my gosh, my house doubled in price,
Right.
therefore my taxes will double, but that's not the reality.
I think also like a lot of it too would be like if there was like an exception program, it's just like making sure it's actually means tested. You know that.
Yeah,
way
yeah,
it's like, yeah. Like
And I think too, and the thing to remember is too, and I used to do federal budget policy, so I am weary that wages don't always indicate wealth, and you have to be very careful about that because some of the wealthiest people have no wages, right?
Parents are those people.
Yeah,
They're retired.
yeah, ditto, right? Like, yeah, like so you have assets, and you need to make sure that you're accommodating for, like,
makes sense.
yeah, you want to make sure because there are people that cannot accommodate, and like, I mean, and the idea that they're being moved from their home or a place that they've lived for 60 years is like, and it's their parents' house, and and I think that is particularly true in Pittsburgh. I grew up in Harrisburg, where like no one lives anywhere near where their parents are from, and for whatever reason, but like my uncle lives in the house he grew up in, right? And I know multiple people, even on my block, who live in the same house that they grew up in, and their kids, adult children, now live with them. And making sure that you're not doing things. And again, I recognize that it's it's a transfer of wealth and it is an asset, but that we're not doing things that disrupt someone's life so significantly that it's like causing, and you're displacement, and you're just recognizing that. And I think acknowledging that this is like a change, and you can't just do it and say we're doing it. You're doing it and explaining it to people. And part of it is just tact, right? You're having this conversation with people before you do it.
Yeah, one of the fortunate things is that the state has also authorized the city to implement a tax deferral program, so that
Yeah,
we
that's
could get
the.
around the avoiding.
Well, I've talked
means
about.
and means test stuff by just saying the taxes will be due, but it'll just be a lien on the property when it's sold.
Yeah.
So you can continue living in it, paying the current taxes.
And then when your great grandchildren want to sell the house, whoever buys it that's a tax liability that they'll owe,
Yep.
which is great.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to suggest something similar because if you have a very valuable property, there should be financial instruments like reverse mortgage to be able to use
Safely,
Yeah.
safely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that has safeguards in because sometimes those are predatory,
Yeah.
oftentimes actually. But yeah, no, they can also be tools for people, for sure.
Because it's like, to me, this idea that, I mean, like, I definitely understand, and I'm sympathetic to the idea that you don't want to be uprooting people and forcing them out of their homes they've lived in for a long time because their tax liability increases. I don't think that that's many people who would be impacted.
For sure.
A very small number, but like this idea that these people who are sitting on these assets that they bought for $20,000 and are now worth $500,000 are somehow victims.
Oh
when
no.
they're sitting on a giant asset. Like, this is that idea that like there's this. I think this picture that's painted of like the poor elderly homeowner that can't shoulder an extra $20 a month in taxes. I just think like these people, they exist, but there's very few of them.
Yeah, and part of these conversations, I think, what happens is they occur online and on Twitter,
Right.
which is like the worst place on earth to have a public policy conversation.
Particularly in Pittsburgh.
Well, as someone who has been cyberbullied extensive, like, and Amy and I too, it's the worst place on earth. And so what I think happens is just you want to make sure that you're explaining it and you're having conversations with people instead of like saying this is what we're doing. But I do think that this conversation is rooted in good public policy, and the city needs to revenue, and taxing property is obviously a way that we do that, and making sure that we are not waiting and that this system is done as fairly and equitably as possible. And right now it's not, because this current system is like A, totally haphazard, and B, it's just antiquated, right? And I think that acknowledging both of those things and recognizing that there's a better way to do it, like we know that. And just sitting on our hands and waiting for someone else to do it is probably not the right way to handle it, because it's very clear that no one's coming to save the day.
We had a county executive run on doing reassessments, and we've seen what's happened. I think like the political pressure to not do it is too strong.
Well,
right now.
and again, like what's so funny is increasing taxes year over year by $20 is way more palatable than increasing taxes every 10 years by $500.
Correct.
Which is
Right. If you do it every year, then nobody will ever think about it.
Correct. Right. I want to go back to 2025 and why this. So I talked about the pandemic money going away. I talked about overtime. And then the last thing I want to flag is in 2020, we punted 2 significant bond payments. In the late 90s, we had a bond for pension debt, which is when we were in our like really significant financial hole. And we punted those payments to 25 and 26. So the bond payment, which is pretty standard at about $50 million a year, those payments are going to go up to $75 million a year in 25 and 26, which is also going to drive costs. It was the right decision to punt those payments because we didn't know what was going to happen. But it is going to be a mandatory expense this year and next year that we just need to pay, right? So those things are sort of creating a financial situation. And then when you look at these macro trends, particularly with housing, in 2022, deed transfer brought in $66 million. This year, we'll be lucky if we hit $40 million. So revenue, particularly in areas that are reliant upon macro trends, interest earnings, for example, one, we have less money invested because all that federal stimulus money went away. But 2, like the economy is very clearly slowing, and deed transfer are 2 reasons that revenue that we've been reliant upon for the last few years is just going to be much lower than, not even lower than budget, but bring in less revenue than we had expected, or than has previously come in from those revenue lines. So in that, we are moving into very lean years. The fleet has been a point of conversation, which I'm happy to talk about. But for comparison, in 2015, we budgeted $5 million for new fleet acquisition. In 2025, we're going to spend $6 million. So 2025 to 2015, I mean, that's like, right? That's not enough money. Particularly when you consider the next 3 years, we're going to be at 3, 3, and 3. Actually, the third year will be at like 2.7. We aren't spending enough money on our vehicles. The city and this government is responsible, in my opinion, for 2 core things: public safety and public works, keeping people safe and keeping things clean. And you need vehicles to do both of those things. So from my perspective, the fleet is a core component of, delivery of these services. And we just haven't invested in the fleet. And this did not start when, Mayor Gainey became mayor. It did not start when Bill Peduto became mayor. These are legacy issues. Fleet investment did peak in 21 and 22 with about, I think it was 12 and 10 million respectively. But it has hovered traditionally around $5 million a year, and it's just not enough. I mean, the ELA, which is our conduit to fleet investment, it gives the city the most flexibility in terms of how and when we purchase vehicles, has estimated that we need about $200 million to modernize the fleet, and that was at their last board meeting in June. So the fleet is going to be a significant issue for a really long time. In the meeting we had today, they recommended, people are familiar, I'm sure, with capital, like what makes it operating versus capital. Okay. So they actually are recommending that we start using bond to cover the purchase of fleet. I don't know why we haven't traditionally done that, but I mean, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul because you have bridges that are out that have no funding source, so they're just going to stay out. I hear you. I don't know that a different administration in Washington would provide funding outlets, and I'm being honest that I think that that's like a possibility, but that's at least 3 years away. So that's where things are. I believe that we can get out of this financial situation without a tax increase. I believe that we are not on the brink of Act 47. I believe that we need to have an honest conversation with our nonprofit partners. I believe that that's not limited to UPMC. We have $15 billion in foundation assets in the city of Pittsburgh. Those foundations employ a lot of people. We need to be asking them just for support, particularly in these narrow years. And I think we need to be honest about where things are headed, and we need to focus a lot more on growth. I was just on the phone. There's a program in Columbus called ADDIE, the American Dream Initiative. Has anybody heard of this? Their first-time homebuyer plan goes up to 120% of AMI for one person in the household. So you can make $90,000 a year, and the city of Columbus, Ohio will give you $12,500 toward closing costs. That's amazing, right? So it doesn't even, even if there's another person in your household, it's one person. And so if you're a teacher at Pittsburgh Public Schools and you want to buy a house in Greenfield, you would qualify for $12,500 in closing costs. And we all know what happens when people buy houses and stay in neighborhoods. It's good for the city. It's good for the neighborhood. And I think the city needs to ask for significant cooperation with these big foundations to do programming like that. We've created a lot of programs, particularly with the URA, which I think are wonderful, but they often are very, very limited in terms of who they support. And I think we need to be broad in our thinking and really be creative. I knew friends in 2009 that qualified for the Obama program. I think it was $8,000 or $12,000. I think the city of Pittsburgh needs to do something like that. We need to bring people back into Pittsburgh. We need to bring families back into our school system. And we need people who want to be here and who will stay. And if you buy a house here and you're invested in your neighborhood, chances are you're going to stay, and you're going to stay in the city, and you're going to raise your family here, or stay here as a single person. I don't have children, but I really think we need to do more to emphasize homeownership and provide that opportunity for intergenerational wealth. And it isn't just for college kids. That's the thing. I talk a lot about, I'm a Pittsburgher by choice, not by birth. And we talk a lot about keeping the college kids who come here, and I think that has to be a continued priority. But we all are aware of the economic, I don't even know, weight we've put around the necks of women of color in this city. And I think if you can provide economic opportunity for first-time homebuyer opportunities for communities of color, it can change and revitalize neighborhoods and families. And so I think it's like these are programs that benefit literally the entire city. And this is actually interesting. I just had a meeting last week with somebody who bought a house in Manchester in 1989 with the Ain't I a Woman program. Tom Murphy was mayor. And we're trying to do a look back and see how many people are still in their homes and how many people have sold it, to just actually measure whether or not a program was successful. Because what happens is a lot of these programs, they start and no one ever actually knows if they're successful 30 years later. So
Common thread amongst a bunch of city programs.
Yeah, does this work, right? And the thing is, if it's 10 years later and everybody's sold their home, that's also helpful to know. Did they make money, and what did it do to the neighborhood? And so we're trying to look into it. It turns out that it's really hard to get information from 1989. So with that, I'm happy to answer any other questions. Amy, you had your hand up.
Okay. So, yeah, relating to, I know that you're quick to say that the controller's office is not a budgeting office, and the city, of course, could grow
Yeah.
its revenue. But besides that, has the controller's office identified areas within the existing budget that, like, you feel could be cut? If you don't answer that, that's okay.
So
Can you repeat the question too?
sure. So Amy asked Amy reiterated that the controller's office is not a budgeting office, which I agree with, but asked what would we recommend is cut. So the URA is currently sitting on about $50 million, and we send them $10 million a year for the Housing Opportunity Fund. It's codified. We raised the deed transfer tax. We have the highest deed transfer tax in the country at 5%. And they're sitting between their housing bond, unspent housing opportunity money. They're sitting on about $50 million in cash. One thing that I would consider doing is, instead of that annual allocation next year, is instead diverting that $10 million to fleet, letting the URA get caught up, and then seeing where they are at the end of next year. But as a general rule for budgeting into 26 and 27, I really think that we need to evaluate if something doesn't fall within the public safety or public works sort of buckets in terms of keeping people safe and keeping things clean, and figuring out if we can work. I am, generally speaking, opposed to anything that moves towards the privatization of government. I believe that these are, like, our parks are public assets. I believe that very strongly. But are there ways to, like, who's been to the Shenley Oval this summer? Okay, the water fountain's like totally gross. Okay, thanks. So, like, is there a way to work with the Parks Conservancy to offload the maintenance of that for 3 years and work with Dick's Sporting Goods to sponsor that? Do you know what I mean? And, like, have these co-op agreements to get us through these years with the recognition that this is a public asset. But I think we really need to be creative, because the water fountain is like, it doesn't work. So that's like the first problem. And the second problem is that it looks like, I don't know, like you can offer a description. It sort of is a cement block. I don't even know where the water would come out of if it turned on, because it's so discolored.
I think it's also one of those ones that just runs all summer. Like, there's no.
With the last time it ran, probably. But when was the last time it was on?
Well, it just also wastes a ton of water. So.
Yeah, also. Yeah, sure. When it's on. Yeah, it is.
That water's not being metered, though.
No. It's, I mean, all ratepayers pay it.
Right.
It's like the zoos. Well,
Right.
There's no contract there. Go ahead.
I will plead ignorance since I don't
That's
know much
okay.
about it, but one thing that you mentioned a bunch of times, and I have some awareness of,
Yeah.
is where the school district taxation comes in
Yeah.
to this, and the school district costs, and, like, is there someone in a comparable role to yours that is administering what they call it, just sort of?
Yeah, so by statute, I am the controller for Pittsburgh Public Schools. Our role at Pittsburgh Public Schools is much more limited. So the school district relies more heavily on real estate and wage taxes than the city does, because we have more, our revenue portfolio is much more diverse than the school districts. So the school district so in 2022, traditionally the Auditor General, who's elected statewide, had conducted audits of all 500 public school districts across the state. In 2022, Tim DeFore, who's the Auditor General of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, closed the School Audit Bureau. So now no one is doing audits of the 500 public school districts across the state. I did an audit unrequested of the P-card usage at Pittsburgh Public Schools. It turns out there are like 450 P-cards in Pittsburgh Public Schools. There are some P-cards with like $50,000 limits, which is insane. A P-card is a procurement card. So P-cards are necessary for governments to be able to do business with small vendors. So, like, Slice on Broadway, it can't wait the 3 weeks it takes to process a check, right? It is necessary. But there should not be 450 P cards in a school district. Maybe like one per. So the school district has issues with purchasing, procurement, and I have been, every contract since I have been sworn in as city controller and therefore school controller is now posted online. We have found more than $50 million worth of contracts at Pittsburgh Public Schools that has not gone out for bid. There are, in the most expensive, like the city, the most expensive thing at Pittsburgh Public Schools is people, salaries and wages, which is totally justifiable. I am the daughter and granddaughter of public school teachers. I will never, ever, ever, ever advocate against educators being paid their worth. And we have awesome and fabulous school teachers in PPS. But the administration at Pittsburgh Public Schools needs to be a lot more diligent and in their oversight of district finances and a lot more transparent. Pittsburgh Public Schools spends, it's at least in the top 5, it might be number 1, more per pupil than any other school district in this state. And I wish it was just because they were spending that much on their awesome teachers. It's a lot of money isn't going into facilities and to teachers, right? A lot of it's going, there's a lot of ed tech contracts. And there's a lot of so we're in the process right now of going through all of these contracts and pulling out the ones that haven't gone out for RFP. And we're at 50 million haven't gone out at all. And then there's another like 30 to 45 million that have gone out, but they're the same 3 companies bid. So it's like a perfunctory review. And then, you know, the school district, it's against state law to pay school board members, which is also crazy to me. Like they have a bigger operating budget than the city of Pittsburgh. It is insane to me. And they have basically one paid staff person. And so we're continuing to look into this. And I am committed to making PPS finances more transparent. I mean, you couldn't find, if you wanted to find a PPS contract prior to January of 2024, you had to, it would probably have taken you 2 days and of doing literally nothing else. It is insane.
Do you think there's any appetite at the state level to change those laws? Because I've always thought it's crazy that, like, in Allegheny County, the only, like, I mean, the real only, like, professional full-time governing body that we have is city council.
Mm-hmm.
And Allegheny County, which has a larger budget, has basically a volunteer council. I mean, they get paid a tiny amount, but it's part-time. You're talking about Pittsburgh Public Schools, bigger budget in the city of Pittsburgh, has an entirely volunteer leadership.
I don't know. I mean, I think the county executive role, I don't know enough about county government to answer that fairly.
But I'm talking about
but the school board,
I mean, county government could pay county councilors more, I think. But the school board, you said it's against state law.
mm-hmm. I mean, what I would like to see state law change is the procurement practices mandated to school districts. They're not required to bid out anything. Like, that's crazy. And I understand for small school districts how some of that could be cumbersome and but one, you're talking about consolidation, like school districts, Beaver County is leading the way in school district consolidation in Western Pennsylvania. That's crazy. So, I mean, school district issues are, I think, driving a lot. And then particularly with the footprint plan, right? Like a year ago, they were going to close schools. Then 6 months ago, they weren't going to close schools. And now they're closing schools, but they're not doing it for, this school district has a footprint that is not in alignment with the number of students. That needs to be something that everybody agrees on. In this room, if you have kids, if you don't have kids, right? But it isn't an automatic cost savings. And to sell it to parents like this is a cost savings measure is also wildly unfair. And so I've heard this doesn't save money like the next day. And the bright spot when you look at building closures and cost savings is Shenley, because Shenley turned into apartments, and the sale yielded, I think, and I have the analysis. If anybody wants it, you can call the office and I can send it to you. Maybe $2.5–3 million, and then that building now pays property taxes, and you can't work backwards to figure out how much is paid in wage taxes from that address, which is also a weird feature of the way wage taxes come in. You can't. I mean, it's an apartment building, like you can't even aggregate it, but anyway. So like that's a bright spot. But a lot of the buildings that they close sit vacant, turn into eyesores, they aren't maintained, and they're then used twice a year as voting locations. And like then you're not moving them onto the tax rolls. And then and if you transfer them to a community group, they're a huge tax liability, or not even a tax liability, a huge liability to whatever civic organization, because a new roof on whatever elementary school costs $800,000. Like who can, I mean, so, and I mean, there does need to be, and I have two cousins who are teachers at Pittsburgh Public Schools. I want to be very clear that this is not a teacher problem, and this is like a structural issue that we have allowed the district to shift in this way. And there's not even one person I think you can even place blame with. I think this has just happened over time. But yeah, but like closing schools is not, one, it's not going to fix anything overnight, but two, it's not going to save money overnight. It probably isn't going to save money over a decade. And three, like, how do you grow the district? I mean, managing decline is like the worst possible thing. And I'm not saying these conversations don't need to happen because the footprint is too big, but like, how do you change the conversation to what changed? I mean, the district in 1990 had 45,000 kids in it. And the steel industry was gone, right? In 2003, when we went into Act 47, the district had 34,000 kids in it, right? Like
Today, what is it?
17.
Oh my gosh.
And we lost a lot of kids during the pandemic. I mean, I think that is something that we do need to acknowledge. And there was no roadmap. No one knew what to do. Yeah, it's like, what do you do? And I say this as, sorry. What do you,
I heard
Private school, homeschool, charter school.
charters?
The per student cost is like 30,000 for.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
30, it's like, I think it's around 30,000.
Yeah.
And the Shapiro budget, which would cap cyber charters at 8,000 a year, would save the district like 25 million a year. So and I am very pro public school. I have only ever gone to public school. But I grew up in a very high performing school district where my mom taught, which I don't recommend if anybody's a teacher. And I went to the University of Pittsburgh and I have a master's degree from Penn State. But I will never, no, but hail to Pitt. But I will never, I do think it's really unfair to criticize parents for doing what they think is best for their kids. And I think that as a progressive Democrat, I believe in public education, and I do think that charter schools emerge when the public school option has
Well, I think that's
failed.
I mean, what you were talking about before about the sort of like being honest with people. I think some of the frustration as a parent, and I am very sympathetic. I mean, everything you're saying, right? Like, what a thankless job running a public school district.
Yeah.
Understood. And like the person who's in it now is following someone who was not
Yeah,
appropriately placed.
yeah,
But like,
that's nice.
but like, yeah, I mean, as a parent who was like engaging in this process all the way through, it was originally sold as like, this is about equity and we want the same outcomes for everybody. And like, okay. And then when parents would ask questions about like, is this about cost? And then it would sort of trickle out that like, well, yeah, we have this giant budget hole.
Yeah, which
It was like,
they
oh,
do, but
right,
that's not. But
totally.
this is not going to save money.
Well, and like, but again, I mean, it feels like, can we be honest about what the problem is and then tackle it realistically?
Well,
And it's not been.
and that's the problem too. Is it's like, and I'm saying this from the position I sit in, and I again continue to seek information like you do as a parent, and I'm like, and I mean this sincerely, what are the problems? So there's a racial achievement gap. We know you have a declining student enrollment figure. I guess it's not student population. So okay, so those I've just identified 2. Like, is that it?
Well, but to bring it back to housing, like, why is the school segregated? Because housing is segregated.
Right, and part of it is so we live in a Pittsburgh is also like a neighborhood city, right? And it's segregated racially, it's segregated ethnically, and it's segregated by topography, right? You have like Polish Hill is like on a hill, and so and you have these factors that have evolved over time and softened to a certain extent, but they're still there. And ignoring it and pretending like they don't exist doesn't solve the problem. It's like, how do you work through that? And how do you work with people and meet them where they are? I feel like there needs to be, sometimes it's like, let me tell you what's wrong instead of like, let's talk about what's wrong. Do you know what I mean? It's like I'm not a parent, so, but it almost is like the conversations and the way people deal with kids. It's like, I'm going to tell you what you did wrong instead of let's talk about what's wrong. And I just think that the conversation can be a lot more transparent. And I do think in full disclosure, I do think that there needs to be a change in the PPS footprint. Like, it needs to happen. You cannot have a building with 100 kids in it. Like, it doesn't make sense. And, I also think there has to be, like, imagine going to a school that is 2/3 empty.
Yeah.
What vibe does that give you? You know what I mean? If you're in a kindergarten classroom, you want it to be colorful and full of life. And I mean, you don't know that because you're 6, but like, that's what you feel when it's not that way. And I think that has to be part of it. But like, we haven't identified what the problem is. Like, we know these are, but what's the problem? So the school district, but I do think that is, and we also have the school district has eliminated a lot of the Black middle class in Pittsburgh. And a lot of that is driven by housing, and you can say this is a problem or this is a problem, but the fact is a lot of the Black middle class in Pittsburgh is gone.
We've talked about this in the context of housing, that like if you're a Black family, middle class Black family, you don't have a lot of options of where to live if you want to live in a Black community.
Mm-hmm.
Because we've basically said, like certain communities, like in the Hill District, it's like they want to build mostly affordable housing, which is great, and we should do it. But also, maybe we should be building housing for, middle class families that want to live there too. We don't really do that as a society.
Yeah, we assign things to people.
We say, this is the neighborhood where we're going to build the affordable housing.
For you.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like why we are, and actually it's funny because when you talk to the council people from those areas, they actually say, well, we need more market rate housing in our area.
Yeah.
We need it to support businesses, to support grocery stores, and for exactly what you said.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's like, it makes sense why people would leave the city with the school district the way it is, honestly. I mean, like I heard, I don't know if this is true, I haven't validated it, but like in Squirrel Hill, something like 20% of students of, like school-age kids go to PPS. 80% go to charter schools, private schools, et cetera.
If anybody wants to look up, we did an audit of the school crossing guards because I love my school crossing guard. I'm sure Paula's not watching because she doesn't know how to turn on, she doesn't Facebook or anything. But you can look at enrollment numbers and see them shift, because in Pittsburgh, school crossing guards are actually paid for from the city, not from the school district. In most cities, the school district pays for them. And which I'm not advocating we change because there would be like a massive revolt. But we took enrollment figures from each of the schools and we calculated like enrollment at parochial, charter, et cetera. And you can see the breakdown from like a long time ago to current. Yeah.
This is getting back to the overtime that you're talking about at the beginning. is it legal for the city to spend more money than was budgeted on overtime,
Yes.
even though council doesn't approve that?
They approved the budget, and yes, I mean, we are legally required to pay people for the work that they've done. And we went over budget. It's a unfortunate trend that we always go over our overtime budget. And last year in my budget hearing, so what happens is, this is a byproduct of Act 47. So the mayor will release a preliminary budget in September, and they do budget hearings, and they're all around the city. And I would encourage all of you to go and advocate for spending on fleet and other capital projects. And they will take all that feedback, and then they'll do budget hearings too before city council. And the budget hearings, city council can amend the budget. And during my budget hearing, where I go before council and I say, this is what my office is doing, this is why I need, we have an outside auditing firm that comes in and does our annual report. It's Meyer Dussel. They're an independent auditor. It just basically, they sign off that our reports are accurate, and the city finances, the report that we release on May 1st is accurate, and but they're professionals, right? So it's a professional services contract. And I explain all that. And in last year's meeting, it was on December 1st, someone on council said, what are you worried about in the budget? And I was like, oh, we're not a budgeting entity, but thank you for asking me. You under budgeted for overtime significantly because you've made no operational changes, and yet you've cut overtime in half, and you're gonna be double where you were this year, 2024. And they said, okay, thank you. And then nothing happened, and they passed the budget. So yes, they will absolutely pay out those hours. The funding will come from, so there is some sort of an offset, right? So when you don't have all the police officers you need, you save money on the salary line, for example, but you make up for it in overtime. So for police, they'll save about $8 million in salary, but they'll spend $8 million in premium and overtime. So that'll get to zero. The issue is with medics and EMS and fire. Those overtime hours are whoa off. And so they are not going to get to zero, because with EMS specifically, there just aren't enough medics, and they didn't budget for enough medics. So that is way, way, way off. And because it's going to hopefully get better into the second half of this year, but they have combo units where an EMT, so there are three kinds of people that work in an ambulance: EMT, advanced EMT, and a paramedic. And they have different education training, and each unit has to have an advanced EMT or a paramedic. You can't have two EMTs together. So because of that staffing, in particular, they just added all these advanced EMTs to alleviate the strain on the medics. But they had not made any of these operational changes until last week. I'm exaggerating. And that's what you need, right? If you're gonna cut your overtime budget, you need to make operational changes at the front end and say, hey, we're gonna do this, this, and this differently so we don't need overtime. That makes sense, but they didn't. But yes, it's legal that they did that.
So what teeth does the budget have? What can't the executive spend on if it's not in the budget?
That's actually, so anything that's budgeted, you can spend money on, but city council approves contracts.
Okay.
So I could have, I'm gonna spend $1 million on Nalgene water bottles in the budget, but until council approves an agreement with Nalgene, I can't actually spend the money. Okay. So council, there has to be legislation tied to an agreement to allow the city controller's office. And I'm happy to if anybody wants to do a day in the life of the controller and how money gets spent, we can do that's actually a good idea for an Instagram thing. Reel? Is that what they're called?
I think TikTok is slowly.
No, I won't go on TikTok. Chinese spyware.
So wages are special in that.
Yes, wages and healthcare to a certain extent, because it goes into an account before we pay it, and there's always extra money in there, in case there's. And fun fact, the city is self-insured, not fully insured. So there, does anybody remember the BDS referendum? Okay, I'll bring it up. Sure. So twice in the last year, people have tried to amend the Home Rule Charter to not allow the city of Pittsburgh to do, the first iteration would not allow the city of Pittsburgh to do business with any entity that does business in the state of Israel, which their example was Dell Computers, which is an American company that's owned by a Jewish family. The second iteration, that was last August. The second iteration was in March, and it was much more broad in scope. It still singled out Israel, but said any company that does any business, war crimes, indentured servitude, like all this stuff. And I would remind everybody that if you're holding a smartphone, there's cobalt in it, which is mined in the Democratic Republic of Congo, probably by slave labor, and all of those companies are owned by Chinese companies, which they're Uyghurs in concentration camps. Okay, so why would that have mattered? One third of the world's naloxone supply comes from Israel, Teva Pharmaceuticals. Two, think of a drug that, like, I take a medicine. It's actually, I don't know where my bag is, but I have a headache disorder I get cluster headaches. The medicine I take is from Israel. I didn't know this until June when I had to open the box, and it's very big on the back. And because the city is self-insured, not fully insured, technically, through two different payers, the city pays for that drug directly. So the city would not have been able to pay for my drug, which is why legislation to amend the Home Rule, or stuff to amend the Home Rule Charter like that, is dumb. Okay, that's the end of my TED Talk. Any other questions? It's ridiculous. Yeah.
We went into state
Act 47.
Act 47.
Yeah.
In the aughts.
2000.
Because of pension liabilities. This report makes it seem like pensions are like
Healthier.
on the right trajectory. Some of the editorials around Pittsburgh have stated that, like, we're on trajectory back to Act 47. Is that actually in the cards? Or
I do not believe it is. The pension fund is quite healthy. We're at about 70% funded, which isn't like awesome, but is really, really healthy. I do not believe we are on the verge of Act 47. I think that this is something that we can navigate our way out of with strategic spending, cost containment, and growth. I think it's really important, and this is what I have sort of anchored on, is being honest with people about the next couple years, because, you know, asphalt's tied to the petroleum index. I don't know if people know that. And like, asphalt's going to be really expensive, right? Like, and so you're going to see less paving anyway, in addition to us having less, you know, flexibility financially. So I think the right thing to do is to tell people that we're going to be in a really tight couple years, rather than say everything's fine and then have you frustrated when you want your street paved and we're like, we'll be there next week. And then it's like a month and a half later, and then we're like, actually it's freezing. And you're like, no, it's August. It's not freezing. So I just think it's really important to be honest with people and just tell people where things are headed, and that this is going to be a really tight couple years, and we need to make sure we're prioritizing growth. We need to make sure we're doing everything we can to, you know, be competitive with other cities. Like the golf building, you know, it's going to become apartments. There are 6 golf buildings in every single city that looks like Pittsburgh, in every peer city Pittsburgh has, right? And so what can we do to make it easy to do business in Pittsburgh? And I'm not talking about skirting safety laws or, you know, I'm not a huge fan of tax breaks, but I am a fan of not having to wait 5 months to figure out you need to fix a comma on a permit, right? Like, we need to be smart and make it easy to do business here, right? We want to be a good partner, and we don't have the capital assets to turn all these buildings, which ones are practically able to be turned into housing. We don't have those capital assets to do it ourselves, right? We need to be a good partner, and we need to find people in the private industry that have that capital to bring into Pittsburgh. And the idea that we can somehow do this ourselves is A, crazy, but B, you know, it's just totally unrealistic, right? Like, there are 6 of those buildings in Cleveland. There are 3 in Columbus. There are 4 in Cincinnati. There are 6 in Indianapolis, right? So the people who are going to invest are going to go somewhere else if we make it that hard. And, I think Pittsburgh's really special, but if you're an investor who wants to, net a profit, you're going to leave. And these buildings are going to be empty, and we're going to be left with an empty downtown. And, I think the news, I'm sure you've all seen it, with enrollment up at Pitt and at Point Park. And I mean, it's atrocious that people are going to be living in hotel rooms. And I think we all are in agreement with that. But it's also a great sign. College kids want to come to Pittsburgh. Okay, how do we get them to stay? How do we turn that that Hampton Inn into a apartment building, right? So I just want to be a good partner in that. I want to make sure that I'm doing everything that I can to make the city a great place to want to do business, and that we're focused on growth. And I've said this before, like we're yes people. And if you want to put a microgreens farm on the top of the city county building, sure. I don't know what that means, but I'm supportive. So.
2 things. One, we can help hit kids by banning student housing on 5th and Forbes using 100% inclusionary zoning. That's just a quip. Don't respond to that too. I guess other than chasing down building permit surveys that we don't have any answers to.
Is that the thing Jack emailed me about?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
With the Census Bureau?
Yes.
Okay.
Jack and I have been
Okay, yeah.
copying you. Thank you for responding to my email at 6 in the morning, but I worry about your work schedule.
I work out really early. It's just an unfortunate thing about my lifestyle. My social life, more specifically.
Yeah. What can we? It's kind of like an esoteric topic, because obviously none of us in this room, other than you, have really that much power over municipal finance. But what can we do to help?
So the one thing I would say is continue to use your voice. And the other thing that's becoming interesting is no one's on Twitter. People I appreciate that there are bullies on Twitter. I'm sure someone's online being mean to me right now on Twitter. No one's on Twitter. Ignore Twitter. But be an advocate. Go in and meet with people on city council. That's where your voice actually carries weight. And say we need to make sure we are doing everything we can to be, pro-growth, inclusive growth, all of those things. But we need to be advocates for growing, and Pittsburgh needs to grow. And, we had good news in 2020. We grew and we're growing, and this is not 2000 or 2010. We are growing as a region, and it's smart and stable. But we need to keep the trajectory going. And the pandemic is going to derail a lot of, really strong numbers that people saw in through the 2010s. I don't know how you actually say that but because people moved home, the pandemic changed a lot of things. And I think the cities that are successful when this next census comes out in 2030 are going to be the ones that adapted well, and we're nimble, and we're well, that's weird. Sure, let's do it, right? And we have so much opportunity. I've spent a lot of time in Uptown in the last month and a half, and I don't know why I don't know. I've ended up in Uptown several times in the last 6 weeks, and it's why don't we build there? There's
have 4 big apartments proposed that are just ready to go.
And here we
Some
are.
of them are banned. I think a lot of them are blocked because of IZ. Actually.
A couple of them are waiting on interest rates. There were a few projects that we looked at in past ZBA hearings from 2014 to 2016 of projects that were proposed that Duquesne University came to and said, no, don't build this. It'll increase traffic.
Well, I do think that as Duquesne needs more housing too. I mean, the medical school has changed things, and I mean, Uptown is on the verge of growth. And the other thing, and I just want to say this because I try to talk about it every time I make public remarks, the Target downtown has changed a lot for downtown Pittsburgh. I grocery shop there. It's a huge win. Why are yes, the Point Park kids? I'm if I go there in the morning because college kids sleep until noon, I'm I can get in and out. But if I'm in there in the afternoon, I'm
5 o'clock.
I'm where are you people?
You're trying to stock shelves and you're trying to shop.
Yeah, it's
I mean,
awesome.
the window fans that just popped up in the front of the store.
No, I haven't got. I have to go pick up prescriptions.
They're quick.
Yeah, they got them out.
Do you grocery shop
I
there?
do grocery shop there.
It's awesome.
I
Like,
even stopped by there.
yeah, it's so nice. It is just like a huge bright spot. And it is, to me, it has totally changed the vibe of downtown because it makes it feel like more of a neighborhood and less of like, it feels like people live there, right? Because you're buying groceries, you're getting bananas. I mean, I'll run in and grab a banana and a yogurt if I'm busy in the middle of the day just for lunch, right? It is in another grocery store downtown. I mean, like, the BNY Mellon building is obviously like this huge question mark over the future of downtown. And I don't know, like, I have no inside knowledge. I don't know what's going to happen. But one thing that, and I'm sure the people at Pitt would love me saying this, but it's like, what if the Graduate School of Business at Pitt, like, what if they took up 4 or 5 floors of that building? Like, why hasn't, I mean, it's a business school, put it downtown. Even if, like, we work with a private foundation to pay their rent for 5 or 10 years, that delays any final decision with the BNY Mellon building, because it can be a semi-anchor tenant. It brings residents downtown and people who want to be downtown. It changes the demand for housing downtown. I mean, we need to be creative. And like, yeah, Pitt's in Oakland. I agree. But so are the medical, all their medical stuff is in Oakland. So why wouldn't you want to bring the law school downtown? That's an ugly building. I'm probably not supposed to say that either. But like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, be creative. And, you know, I just think we really need to be thoughtful and just say yes. Like, say yes.
We agree with you wholeheartedly.
Okay,
I just, in the spirit of like, yeah, I'm very curious if you have a comment about Wilkinsburg amalgamation or not.
about what?
About Wilkinsburg joining the city or not.
I think a lot of the city side saying no. So Wilkinsburg and Mount Lebanon, just for, and this was as of that conversation, which was, I think, in 2022. So I don't know if anything changed. But as of then, Wilkinsburg and Mount Lebanon had the same bond rating. So a lot of the conversations around this is going to hurt Pittsburgh and blah, 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 blah from city residents was driven.
It's just racist.
Yes, it's driven exclusively by people like, I don't know what else you could attribute it to, because Mount Lebanon and Wilkinsburg having the same bond rating, I mean, as a city, it would have the same impact on us, like municipally, right? Like, so I do believe that if people in if you live in Wilkinsburg, it should be your say if you are annexed into the city. Like, I don't think I should say you now live in the city, because I'm just big on consistency, and I go back to my neighborhood and how I now live in a historic district, and I never got to vote on that, which I think is, I was just told, and I don't like that. But for the city and for growth, I mean, I am a big fan of municipal, like the consolidation at a minimum of services. Like, I just found out that ambulances, and our specs are different, I'm sure, but in Ross Township cost like $200,000 less than they do in the city.
Why are the specs different?
I don't know.
Is Ross Township different at all from the city?
I don't know. And like, there could be
They're right
like,
next to each other.
but if we're self-insured and they're fully insured, like that, there could be liability issues. There could be other. I mean, we're a city of the second class. If they're a municipality of the whatever.
I kind of doubt that.
I'm not a lawyer, but
I just feel like
but my
most of the times where we've uncovered things like this, it just comes down to like somebody made that decision at some point.
Correct.
And that's
So-
how it is for the rest of eternity.
So, but I'm sorry. What's your name? Elaine, sorry. So, but to your point, Elaine, like, I don't want to assign to Wilkinsburg what people in Wilkinsburg should want. And so I absolutely think they should vote. I think they should vote yes to annex into the city of Pittsburgh. And I think that all of the other, like, smaller municipalities, I think it's particularly necessary with school districts, just like Carlinton in the west, like they just don't have any business. There's no like business there to tax. So it's a like underfunded school district, and these kids live like 2 miles from Char Valley. Like, that's not fair. That's ridiculous.
And I mean, the issue with places like Wilkinsburg, and I think like Wilkinsburg is maybe the canary in the coal mine. They won't be the last like distressed township in Pittsburgh. It will happen to all of the townships in Pittsburgh at some point because they've overbuilt infrastructure. You know, it's like it's the suburban Ponzi scheme, right?
Well,
but, like, Wilkinsburg is probably like it will continue. Taxes will continue to go up.
Yeah.
The tax base will continue to get smaller because taxes go up. More people will flee. The taxes will go up more. Like it will just. There's no. How do you break out of that if you're then without doing something like combining with a larger?
Do you understand with Wilkinsburg School District, they do have more debt than like Mount Lebanon School District, and they built before. Because we took their high school. Yeah. Now they come to So I think they've added and built like some capital projects that. So I do think, and because of state law, their school district will also go away. But for the municipality to municipality merger, that was like the idea that would somehow hurt city finances was like total bullshit. And driven, exclusively by race. I would be my. I mean, I don't think you could blame it on anything else.
One of the reasons that so few municipal consolidations happen in Pennsylvania is because state law requires that both municipalities vote. Okay, that both municipalities vote in a majority in favor. What it used to be is that
the voters
total, yes. So
not council.
I believe so. I believe
so.
It has to be approved by the voters.
So the voters of a majority of Pittsburgh has to vote in favor, and then a majority of just Wilkinsburg have to vote in favor, and they both have to vote in favor. Like you have to win a 50% plus one majority of both two separate places that are consolidated.
When Pittsburgh annexed Allegheny City, for example, which I think we can all look back on and say was probably a good thing because now that's part of the city. It was a majority of the total of the voters.
Oh.
So all of the voters get to vote, and if a majority of all of the voters say we want consolidation, then you consolidate.
I mean, then it feels like that law needs to change. But
that was what it used to be. That was what it used to be.
I see what you're saying.
But because of what it is now, it's like basically impossible to ever have municipal consolidations because you need both municipalities and a majority of both of the municipalities to agree to the consolidation. And so we have 130 of them in our county, and it will never change unless the state law makes it easier.
I got a master's degree 5 years ago, and like the Brookings, I remember one of the papers was about, one of my paper, I wrote about a Brookings paper that highlighted Allegheny County's municipalities and how difficult it was to settle businesses here because like people didn't know if they were in Wilkinsburg or Wilkins Township or Forest Hills or Churchill, and like the lines are so you're just like.
I still don't know where Pittsburgh ends and Wilkinsburg begins. To be honest.
I have the official map as a favorite on my phone. I can say that.
Do you? Oh, congratulations! You're officially a nerd.
I think we were at the picnic. We were talking about how some houses are like cut straight in half. So I was like, oh, do you get to choose?
It's your front door. So
your front door.
Well,
apparently.
Where are your front doors?
Where your front door is, where the threshold is. That's your municipality.
Really?
So
can you get a permit to your front door?
I don't want to cut this off, and we can keep chatting. But we are at 8:30, and we tend to try to stay on track with timing. So we'll end the meeting now, and then people can stick around and continue to have conversations.
Yeah.
Jack did want to ask a question about land value tax, but
Oh my God,
he can email it to you.
Wait, who did Jack? Jack, is he on right now?
Yes, he's on.
Hi, Jack. Email it to me. We'll look at it.